Hello and welcome. My name is Justin, and thank you for joining me here at the table again for another episode of Mastering Monsters. Today we've got an interesting one, a creature so stealthy that by the time you've stepped into its lair, into its domain, it's already too late. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? All right, so as you saw, this creature is very interesting. This is a water elemental creature, one that hides in ponds, in pools, in rivers, in spaces that it deems its own territory and will protect with its very life. Yes, today we are talking about a creature called the Water Weird. This creature is very interesting. It lives in urban, underdark areas. It lives in pools where it controls its territory, and it is so stealthy in these waters that it straight up has a trait where it's invisible in water, as you can see here. While it's completely submerged in the water, it is indistinguishable from any of the water around it. You can't see its movement. You can't see, it doesn't create ripples in the water as it moves. It simply is part of the water. I would imagine that its body even ripples with the water around it. So this is a very stealthy creature, one that you can very much so happen upon on accident. It's got a pretty decently high AC, or not AC, HP. Its AC is moderate. It's got a pretty decent initiative score though, and it's got a decent amount of damage that it can dish out. It's only got a single melee attack, but it does have a +5 to that attack, and it does 3d6 plus 3 damage, which is a pretty decent hit. Honestly, if I was to homebrew a stronger one, I would probably give it some type of water projectile, but you know, that would just be my personal opinion. And it's also got another trait called Waterbound, where the Water Weird dies if it leaves the water to which it is bound, or if the water is destroyed, which allows for some interesting ideas on how to take care of this creature. This creature is typically described as of a serpentine image with dragon-like features, as you can see from the image here. If I was to move my face, this creature is very much so like a reversed horned dragon, very similar to how you would see some dragonborns maybe. It's got a long serpentine body that is, of course, only visible when it decides to emerge from the water, typically when the waters are disturbed. Its main motivation is to protect the pools and fountains and other watery areas to which they inhabit. And it's actually intelligent enough that it's able to learn and understand its surroundings over time, so maybe even creating plans to take care of would-be evildoers or intruders, I guess you could say. The encounter type that I rolled for this is an infiltration, so that'll be interesting. It's a relatively low difficulty. It's only an 8, so there's no extra creatures to encounter. And the environments, as I said, are typically in the Underdark or in urban areas, so, away from civilized areas, from settlements, things like that. Spaces where I'd imagine that it can rest and protect its territory. I really like this creature. I think that it's very interesting. I love the idea that it is it straight up melds with the water that it inhabits. It simply is a spirit that lives within this water and is a part of it wholly and entirely, and so much to the point to where if the water that it inhabits is dissipated in some way or disappears, it just dies. Thinking the Underdark, I think of, currently I'm running Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden, and it's in that book, in that module. Here's a little spoiler warning if you haven't played this module or read through it. At some point, the players are faced with the threat of a Dwerger warlord named Zardarok. And Zardarok lives in a Dwerger stronghold somewhere hidden in the spine of the world up in the northern reaches of Faerun. Now, there's only a couple of entrances into Zardarok's stronghold, into his castle, if you will, and one of those happens to be from the Underdark. So I like the idea of maybe placing this in, because I might even use this for one of my games. If you're one of my players watching this, might want to fast forward a little bit, or even click off this video until after maybe we encounter this. I love the idea that this creature is sort of a check to anyone who might otherwise attempt to take the passage through the Underdark and up into the Dwerger stronghold. The encounter would work very well if placed just outside of the Underdark entrance to Zardarok's stronghold. Not necessarily as something that he has placed there. I like the idea that this just happened to be a coincidence, that maybe one or two water weirds have made their home in a pool, or rather maybe even a flow of water that maybe crosses the path of this cave system that leads into Zardarok's stronghold, right? And that Zardarok may be just taking advantage of that, in which case it's just a natural barrier to entry, a naturally occurring protection for him, something that he as a warlord would be smart to take advantage of. Okay, so this is the idea of this is that this is a gateway for the infiltration of Zardarok's stronghold, as the players are expected to do in, I believe, Chapter 3 of Rime of the Frost Maiden. And I like the idea, let's see, should this be a pool of water, or should it be a water flow? It doesn't necessarily suggest that it's in pools, or I like the maybe this is a space where snowdrip runoff from the snowy mountains of the spine of the world above just so happen to be dripping down into this cave system, into a large pool that has over time gotten larger and larger, and the water weirds has made its home here at some point in time. We've created the setting and behind this encounter. We will be encountering this in the caves leading up to Zardarok's castle, and the water weird lives in a pool of water that is made of runoff from the snowy slopes of the spine of the world above. That sounds pretty interesting. That sounds fun. All right, it's time for running the encounter. This is the section. This is the section of these encounter write-ups where we describe and come up with how the encounter is to be run by the DM. So in this case, players are currently traveling through the Underdark, underneath the spine of the world, and have managed to find the final stretch of cave that leads to the doorway into Zardarok's castle. As they're making their way through, they come across this pool of water. This pool of water being rather large. We'll say it's large enough that jumping across it is quite the feat. Something that maybe only using the jump spell could be done with. Because of the way the jump mechanics work in D&D 5e, and if you don't already know, the way the jump mechanics work is that they're based off of your strength score, right? So if you're trying to do a high jump, your character can jump as high as, I believe, twice your strength modifier. So if your strength modifier is a +2, you can jump up to 4 feet high. Now, as for long jumps, as long as you have a 10-foot run up to the start of the jump, you can jump as long as your strength score. So if you have a 15 for your strength score, if you run 10 feet before making your jump, you can jump as far as 15 feet. If you're standing in place and making the jump, you can only jump half of that. So it would be around 7.5 feet. Now, if you use the jump spell, it triples the distance at which you can jump, both high and long. So this type of, I have made it so that this pool is, it stretches from wall to wall of the cave. So either side, the water goes all the way across. There's no space where players can step along the edge of the cave to get around this pool of water. It is 10 feet deep, so it's a pretty steep drop off into this pool, and 35 feet long. So the only way to be able to jump across it would be to be able to jump a distance of at minimum 35 feet. Now, I don't know, nor have I ever heard of any character that naturally can jump 35 feet, even with their strength score. You can't get up to 35 on the strength score unless you're doing a homebrew thing. So this is the kind of thing that only magic could help solve if somebody wants to jump across it. If maybe you want to try and freeze the water, something along those lines. So we've described the pool of water itself. Now, we have to come up with how many of these water weirds are going to be in here, right? I'm gonna be situating this encounter based on the players that I currently have in my Icewind Dale game, and currently I have 4 players, one of which is a tank. We have 1 full caster and 2 half casters, which means that we lean more towards magic rather than leaning into into strength necessarily. So means that we should probably gear this encounter towards being able to be solved in a magical way, and also understand that players don't have as large of a health pool as they would otherwise have if there were more martial weapon-based classes in there. So the health pool is going to be a little bit lower. But I also know that this particular group of players is quite resourceful. So I like the idea of there being 2. It's also a rather large pool of water, meaning that the water weirds could take up a large section. So that's something to think about. So maybe I could keep it at 1. Let's see. It has resistance to fire and doesn't have any vulnerabilities to any specific damage. Let's see. I'm going to go with 1. Yes, I've come to the conclusion that only having 1 in this pool of water is probably best, considering how relatively small it is. It's only 35 feet long, and a large creature can be around 10 to 15 feet large, if I'm not mistaken, meaning that the water weird will take up almost half the pool within this combat encounter. And I imagine the cave being roughly 15 feet wide, 10 to 15 feet wide. It's a decent sized cave opening, right? And now I have to think about how do Zardarok and his men or his followers make it through this cave without being attacked by and probably killed by this water weird every time they go through. Because Dwerger do dwell in the Underdark quite often, and Zardarok and his men do use the Underdark to travel quite often, if I would argue more often than using the Overworld. And they have to have some way of getting across. Okay, so the way that I see it is that Zardarok is evil. He'll take advantage of any advantage that he can get, and in this case, I believe that he has created. He has hired a mage from the Arcane Brotherhood to create teleportation circles on either side of this pool of water. These teleportation circles have been created in such a way that that they can only be seen when a creature is currently invisible. And they can only be interacted with and used by a creature stepping inside of them while holding a piece of Chardolin. Now, Chardolin is a gemstone that is found in Icewind Dale, and it's actually a very large part of Zardarok's plan. So him and his men would have a pretty solid amount of this stone with them, right? And there's a pretty good chance that along the way, by the time players get here, that they would have a piece of Chardolin as well. I believe that my players do as well. This allows for players to even stumble into this, but it does make it so that players who are mages have a better chance of finding this circle. And I also think that I would allow this magic circle to be detected with the detect magic spell. So I made a couple of changes. I like the idea that Zardarok would hire a member of the Arcane Brotherhood to help solve this problem, as he probably wouldn't want to take care of it himself. He's a warlord who has other things to deal with. So he hires this member of the Arcane Brotherhood who places teleportation circles at either end of this pool of water. And the mage has created these circles in a way that they can only be seen by a creature who is currently invisible, and they can only be used by placing a piece of Chardolin inside of the circle on the wall. So holding up a piece of Chardolin, which is a stone that is found in Icewind Dale and throughout the module Rime of the Frost Maiden, and is a huge part of Zardarok's plan, meaning that him and a lot of his men will probably have Chardolin as well. And probably the players by the time they get to this part of the adventure as well. There's a pretty good chance. And any willing creature who holds a piece of Chardolin up to this teleportation circle, as well as any creature who is touching that one, is able to activate it, and it teleports them to the other side, the other teleportation circle. Also, because this is a teleportation circle, any creature who casts Detect Magic nearby can also sense the School of Conjuration magic coming from the circle. They can't necessarily see it because it can only be seen when the creature is invisible, but this gives mages a higher chance to be able to find it, right? So now that we have that part figured out, we've got the setting, we've got the mode of its use by Zardarok and his men. Now we just need to finish writing the water weird side of things, right? Okay, that was pretty simple. If any creature comes into contact with the pool of water in any way, the water weird will immediately attack with advantage due to it being invisible within the water. So yeah, there we have it. This is the encounter that we've written up for this interesting creature, the water weird. I might actually implement this encounter. So anyone who has watched this video, who's in my Icewind Dale game, probably be ready for this one. You've also spoiled it for yourself, but you know, I might also throw some extra odds and ends in there. For whenever we encounter this in the game, so it probably won't run just like this. They know I can be a bit evil. So anyways, thank you for joining me here for another episode of Mastering Monsters, and keep an eye out for another one. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button, hit subscribe if you want to see more, maybe click the bell to get notifications whenever I upload more videos, and check out my Patreon. The link is on my YouTube channel, and it'll also be in the description for this video. You can find some of the maps that I'm working on. I've got a supplemental content for D&D 5e up, and other things are going to be going up in time as well. So thank you once again for joining me for another video, and I will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.